The 78th United Nations General Assembly debate came to a close in New York after a week in which world leaders gathered to discuss possible solutions to global challenges such as peace, security, and sustainable development. Cuba's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Bruno Rodriguez, released the security camera video of the moment of the terrorist attack on the headquarters of the Cuban diplomatic mission in Washington, which took place on Sunday night. And in France, railroad transfer unions called for a strike to denounce increased job cuts. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Ana Rosabal from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In an effort to restore confidence and promote unity, the 78th UN General Assembly concluded on Tuesday with closing remarks by Denis Francis, President of the General Assembly. After a week of discussion at the United Nations General Assembly, world leaders debated possible solutions to global challenges such as peace, security, and sustainable development. Most world leaders called for real solutions to address climate urgency, inequalities in the financial system, political fragmentation, and an end to unilateral sanctions. Most of the figures claim that the world needs more global prevention and that the United Nations must help overcome geopolitical divisions. On the other hand, the main speeches focuses on the fulfillment of the North of the pledge of funds for preventive actions against climate change in the South, as well as the lifting of unilateral sanctions against Cuba and Venezuela. During the address by Stanley Kakuko, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Zambia at the 78th United Nations General Assembly, emphasized that the threat of a nuclear war is an element that needs all attention and called on all nations to prevent the proliferation of nuclear weapons.
The threat of nuclear war is a matter that needs our full attention. We take this opportunity to reiterate our resolute stance against the proliferation of the nuclear weapons, and we advocate for a world free of threats. We urge all nations, and we mean all nations, to uphold their obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty and to work to prevent the development and production of chemical weapons. Mr. President, we set our eyes on a world we set our eyes on an agenda to set the world on a path of sustainability, of success for the next generation. We are hopeful that this summit, this year, all our voices will be heard.
For his part, the Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs of Syria condemned the Western sanctions against sovereign nations, and he described as terrorism all forms of unilateral economic measures.
Calls for an end to the military action and exercises conducted by the United States on the Korean Peninsula, which lead to escalation of tension in this region. Syria also demands the lifting of all forms of unilateral coercive measures imposed by Western countries on the Russian Federation, Iran, Venezuela, Belarus, Nicaragua, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Zimbabwe, Eritrea, and against my country, Syria. It considers them economic terrorism no less brutal or dangerous than armed terrorism, especially in terms of its catastrophic humanitarian effect on the targeted peoples.
Likewise, Nicaragua's foreign minister expressed before the UN General Assembly its combative solidarity with the Latin American people that suffer blockades such as Cuba and Venezuela, among others.
We are peoples and countries that resist and fight the blockades, the economic warfare, the systemic and permanent intervention in the social, cultural, economic and political life of all of our institutions. As you note, more and more violations of all rights on top of one another. Our combative solidarity with the people of Cuba, with Martí, Fidel Raul Miguel Diaz-Canel over 62 years of murderous blockade. Our combative solidarity with the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, where Chavez lives on, the struggle goes on, and where Nicolás has defeated all attempts at destruction. Our combative solidarity with the peoples and governments of our Central American region that do not bend the knee in the struggle for security, for peace, so as to confront and conquer the hell of poverty. Our solidarity with Honduras and its brave president Xiomara Castro, Honduras, our fraternal neighbour, where Morazán and Sandino prevailed, our family fraternal embrace, always in solidarity. Our combative solidarity with Bolivia, the great people of Tupac Katari, who are moving ahead amidst the same threats as always, with the people of Argentina and their sovereign rights over the Malvinas Islands, with Puerto Rico, brave and unstoppable in their just struggle for independence.
Cuba's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Bruno Rodriguez Parrilla, shared on his social network X the security camera video of the moments of the terrorist attack on the headquarters of the Cuban diplomatic mission in Washington. According to the head of the Cuban diplomacy, the video shows the moment when the terrorists arrived in front of the diplomatic headquarters, ignited the Molotov cocktails and threw them against the facade of the building. The Cuban Minister of Foreign Affairs also indicated that the material was delivered to the U.S. Authorities in Cuba received numerous expressions of support from both inside and outside the United States since the news of the terrorist attack went public. Denouncing the event, Rodriguez Parrilla informed that this is the second violent attack against the diplomatic headquarters in Washington. Russia has called on the United States to conduct a thorough investigation into the attack on the Cuban embassy in Washington on Sunday night. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said on Tuesday that Moscow condemned the attack on the Cuban diplomatic headquarters. She stressed the need for the perpetrators to be brought to justice so that such a serious act does not go unpunished. The spokeswoman hoped that the U.S. authorities will carry out a swift and thorough investigation. She recalled that this was not the first crime committed against a Cuban diplomatic mission in Washington. She also demanded that the receiving party guarantees the security of foreign diplomatic mission on its territory in accordance with international obligations. And China also condemned the terrorist attack on the Cuban embassy in the United States and urged Washington to ensure the safety of diplomatic personnel. The Asian Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin reiterated that Beijing opposes all forms of violent attacks on diplomatic missions and urged the host country to investigate the incident. According to the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations as a receiving state, the United States has its special duty to safeguard the mission premises from intrusion or harm and to refrain from disrupting the mission peace or dignity by taking all necessary steps. In this sense, also the Argentine government, through the social network X, repudiated the attack against the embassy of the Republic of Cuba in Washington, D.C. in the United States. These statements reiterated the South American nation's solidarity with the Cuban government and people, and it affirmed that the administration of Alberto Fernandez maintains its commitment to dialogue and nonviolence. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, new dates, and more. All the stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back. In Colombia, indigenous people continue to arrive in Bogotá to join the March for Life to denounce the violence in their territories by armed groups. More than 14,000 indigenous people from more than 10 departments of the country are expected to arrive in the capital on Tuesday to demand an end to the assassinations of social leaders, the protection of sacred lands, and the health of the authorities. During the mobilization that will take place on September 27, various sectors of society and mainly movements will participate. At the same time, it is expected that indigenous leaders will meet with the President Gustavo Petro before returning to the territories at the end of the week. Relatives of the 43 missing students from Ayotzinapa demand that the Mexican government fulfill its promise of justice. Legal representatives of the families of the victims expressed to the media their disappointment at the little information provided by the government of López Obrador after a meeting held Monday at the National Palace. The parents denounced the obstacle placed by the military to the investigation with the withholding of documents that they would consider important for the clarification of the events of 2014. According to the relative, it is important to remember the historical truth about the disappearance and criminalization of the 43 normalista students from Ayotzinapa. At least 8 people died and 2 were missing in Mexico after heavy rain turned a mountain stream into a torrent of muddy floodwater that swept away villages, authorities said on Monday. The bodies of some buildings were reported to have been found several miles downstream from where they disappeared near Outland in the western state of Jalisco. 8 people are reported dead so far, and search efforts continue to locate 2 more people. The Jalisco Civil Protection Service said in a statement Monday evening. Deforestation and the fire earlier this year caused significant damage to the wooded area and could have contributed to the flash flooding. Dozens of rescue workers were deployed into the area to search for the missing authorities. Mexico is regularly hit by flooding and tropical storms, and scientists say that the climate change is increasing the risk of heavy rain because warmer air holds more moisture. At least 6 people died and more than a dozen are still missing in the center of Guatemala's capital after the El Naranjo River overflowed its banks and swept away 6 houses in the Dios Esfiel settlement located under a vehicular bridge. According to authorities, there are 2 minors among the dead. Hundreds of firefighters, police, military, neighborhoods, and volunteers are participating in the search for the missing. Although the attacks were suspended on Monday afternoon due to the rains and will resume this Tuesday, most of the houses in the areas are between sheets. The river that overflowed carried much of the sewage from homes and the capital, and thousands of underprivileged inhabitants have erected buildings on the riverbanks even though it is prohibited by the authorities. Populators have been forced to build their homes on ravine slopes, riverbanks, and flood zones in Guatemala, where 59% of the 17.7 million inhabitants live in poverty. In France on Tuesday, the Railroad Transport Union CGT Cheminots Rail and CFDT Cheminots called a strike to denounce the transfer of employees to subsidiaries. The union mobilization also protests against the dismantling of the company Fret SNCF in the discontinuity plan prepared by the government for the European Commission, with the elimination of 500 jobs out of the 5,000 rail workers out of the SNCF group, and the cessation of the operation of all combined trains that were transferred to the private sector. In January, the European Commission opened an investigation into the financial support provided by the French state to Fret SNCF between 2007 and 2019, in particular the cancellation of its debts of 5.3 billion euros. Brussels could declare this aid illegal, which could lead to the automatic bankruptcy of Fret SNCF, unable to repay it. On Tuesday in Spain, Alberto Núñez Feijóo, People's Party leader, began defending in Parliament his candidacy to become the next ruler of the Spanish government, one day before an investidure vote. According to the polls, the far-right opposition leader could lose his electoral race in the context where the People's Party leader does not have a majority to form a government despite having been the most voted in the July elections. During his speech, Feijóo attacked Pedro Sánchez's government for its plan to retain office by obtaining the support of a Catalan separatist party. Feijóo insisted that he has the votes he needs to become prime minister, but assured that he will not pay the price he's being asked to pay to do it.
In the project I have come to present to you, there is no amnesty, there is no self-determination of part of the nation, nor analogous or equivalent formulas. In view of the trend of the petitions heard in the last few weeks, I understand that someone who aspires to be the president of all Spaniards, of all of them, must take this clear from the very first moment, and I am doing so. For me, it's neither legally or ethically acceptable. Outside the Constitution, there is no democracy.
We have a second show break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's more recent events. Final show break, don't go away. Welcome back. Thousands of Armenian refugees fled Nagorno-Karabakh on Tuesday after authorities in the war-torn breakaway state of Azerbaijan raised death toll from the fuel explosion. Armenian Health Minister Anahit Avanesian announced on Tuesday that a total of 125 people were killed in the explosion that occurred the day before in a gasoline depot near the town of Estenakabet in the Nagorno-Karabakh region, which resulted in a large fire. Most of the victims were refueling for the journey through the so-called Lachin corridor, which connects the impoverished and historically disrupted region with Armenia. The government and the Organization for the Liberation of the Palestine on Tuesday welcomed the visit of the Saudi ambassador and consul of Jerusalem, Naif al-Sodairi, to the occupied territories. The visit is considered a historic milestone for the development of fraternal relations between the two countries and the opening of joint cooperation on all fields. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry appreciated the support of Saudi Arabia under the leadership of the custodian of the two holy mosques, King Salman bin. This is the first time a senior Saudi official visits the occupied Palestinian territories in the appointment of al-Sodairi as non-resident ambassador to Palestine. Niger's National Council for the Safeguarding of the Homeland has reminded the French government that the timetable for the withdrawal of its troops must be set within a negotiated framework. They said this after releasing that President Emmanuel Macron would finally authorize the departure of their troops. The transitional junta currently governing Niger had repeatedly called for the withdrawal. Stressing that this is a historic moment and recognizing that the decision of the Élysée represents a new stage in the country's sovereignty, they informed France that they were taking note of the decision, hoping that the declaration will lead to the official acts and a process of common agreement. In India, the 5th World Coffee Conference is being held at the Bangalore Palace from September 25 to 28. The World Coffee Conference, a unique meeting between countries to take advantage of the full potential of coffee, will take place until September 28th. This is the first time that Asia is hosting the World Coffee Conference, and the venue is the Bangalore Palace. Around 2,000 invited delegates from over 80 countries are attending the conference, which is organized by the International Coffee Organization, Central Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Karnataka, Government and Coffee Board of India. Among the delegates, there are growers, roasters, curators, exporters, traders, coffee show chain owners, and retailers. We have come to the end of this year's brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Ana Rosabal. Thank you for watching.